It's the Blue Vote Cafe, a little bit wonkish, a whole lot of fun. I'm David Schellenberg along with Rachel Wigster. We are in Canada's capital of Ottawa, talking to people around the world. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, David. How are you?
Well tanned. I'm just back from Cuba.
Yeah, talk about talking to people around the world. How about jetting around the world for fancy vacations in the middle of November?
Well, Cuba I wouldn't consider to be a fancy vacation. I would consider that to be an affordable vacation.
True. Yes, and yet there were tanning opportunities.
Yes, the word tanning and the word rum and the word beach come up a lot when you discuss Cuba.
And friends. You spent time with friends. Yes.
Yep. Who's with us today, Rachel?
Today we are joined by Annika Krovi and Henry Pahlow from High School Democrats of America. Annika is the national chair and Henry is the national vice chair, and we're delighted to have you guys. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Really pleased to have you. Well, I guess we should start with our usual question. Yep. Where are you in the world?
Hey, so I'm Annika. I'm based in Greenville, South Carolina, which I was just saying, it's nice and sunny over here, which is really great before we get into the rainy winter season. So appreciating that sunshine.
You should try winter in Ottawa.
Yeah. Annika, is that where you're born and raised?
No, so I was actually born in Buffalo, a little bit closer to y'all, Buffalo, New York. Yeah. But I've lived here for, I think, about 6 years now, so I consider myself a true Greenvillian at this point.
Nice. And Henry, where are you?
Actually, I live near another green town, Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I laugh when Annika talks about the nice weather she's been having, because we've been getting quite a bit of snow over the past few days up here in the tundra.
The tundra.
Yeah, it's a big world.
Henry, we're further north than you.
We are.
That's true.
But you may at this point have more snow than we've had. We've had a lot of sort of flurries that don't stick around. Yeah.
So are you a suburb of Green Bay then, Henry?
Actually, I live rural, so my hometown is a little smaller than Green Bay. It's around 300 people. But when people ask where I'm from, I just say around Green Bay, because nobody's really heard of Maribel, Wisconsin.
But let's talk about High School Democrats of America. Tell us about it. Tell us what it exists to do.
Yeah, definitely. So I can get us started, and I'm sure Henry will have more to add on. But High School Dems is a really awesome organization. We've got over 10,000 high schoolers from all across America and, now hopefully abroad, where we have high schoolers that organize in local and state chapters and all the way up to our national level. We do kind of a little bit of everything in the world of democratic politics. So we do grassroots organizing and advocacy events and phone banking and, issue-based advocacy and meetups with elected officials and candidates. So kind of in all of those different realms, and we're really excited to have such a active and involved membership that is excited about amplifying youth voices in politics.
That's wonderful. How long has it been around?
So High School Dems was originally a caucus of the Young Democrats of America. And I don't know if I've brushed up on my HSDA history well enough to remember, but it was just about, I would say, a decade ago that we officially kind of split into separate organizations.
Interesting.
Because a young Democrat would go to, what, like 18 to 24?
They actually go all the way up to 35. So a little bit broader.
We've actually had them on the pod. Yeah, that's what I was remembering. It goes surprisingly old.
Yeah, to us, it's a bit old. I'm sure they wouldn't like it so much if we called them old at this point.
No. So, but you're basically anybody who's in high school up until the point they graduate, no matter what their age is, or do you have an age range?
No, it's purely based off of just, school membership. So as long as you're a student in high school, whatever that means for you, you are more than welcome to join us.
Interesting. So how did you get involved, Henry?
That's a good question. Because, growing up in a rural community, as I was talking about before, there's not always a lot of opportunities to get involved in cool organizations like this. But I actually was motivated to get involved in democratic politics because both of my parents are public servants. My mom's a social worker and my dad's a teacher. So they were really affected around 10 years ago when the state of Wisconsin banned the right of public sector unions to bargain for fair pay.
Right.
and Democrats were fighting back against that. So I kind of saw how that impacted them, and that motivated me to want to be a part of a party that supports my parents in their public servant roles and fights for public servants all across the country. So I got involved around the 2020 election. I actually started canvassing and making phone calls for my local political party, and kind of started working as a youth organizer with the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, where I became acquainted with the leadership of the high school Democrats of Wisconsin at that time. So then I joined their board as the programs director, and by the next year I was their chair. So I worked with some of the campaigns during the midterm elections last year when Governor Evers won re-election.
Right.
And now this year I've made the move up to the national board.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, what about you, Annika? What drew you in?
I'd say maybe a mirrored story, if not the same, because I kind of was always interested in politics, very closely follow the news and all of that. And it just became a lot more personal for me when I watched my grandparents who are immigrants and actually just recently gained citizenship. They were struggling to find affordable healthcare at that point. Yeah, I know it's a great full circle story at this point. But at the time, they were definitely struggling to find affordable healthcare, and they definitely needed it at that point. So my interest in politics actually came from that side, like the healthcare side. But then I, got really involved in high school Dems beginning my freshman year, and was just doing phone banks, and it was during the pandemic as well. So we were really kind of isolated at that point, and I found a really great community within HSDA of like-minded students that were interested in getting involved, and so that kind of pushed me to keep going in the organization. So I later served as the national committee coordinator and the national chief of staff, and just like Henry was this year elected to our executive board.
Right.
Oh, so you've only been in these positions since the beginning of the year?
Yes. So we were both elected in July of this year. So
Wonderful.
And our term goes until the convention next year, where we'll nominate our presidential candidate.
Right.
Fabulous.
Right. So, Henry, have you voted in any elections yet?
No, that's I'm very excited. One of the big things I'm excited about for this next year is it'll actually be the first election that I can vote in. Yeah. I turn 18 in June, so through all this work I've done, I've never been able to vote, but I'll be casting my first ballot come November.
Actually, same here. It's very exciting. My grandparents and I will be voting together in our first election.
Oh, wow. Nice. I can already see the pictures. That's fantastic.
Yes. No, it's very perfect. Like I said, it's a very wholesome story, but very excited to be able to also be laying the groundwork for what will hopefully be a Democrat win up and down the ballot next year in 2024 too. So that'll make it even sweeter.
Absolutely. You guys, you're doing so much. How do you fit this in along with school?
A lot of late nights, I'll say. I feel like Henry would agree.
I was going to say there was a bit of a silence there. You had me worried. Well, we won't ask about your report cards.
I do music theater as well, so there's always kind of a topic of I'll join this meeting after rehearsal. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely interesting, kind of working our schedules, and we always kind of have to work around when everyone's available. I mean, high schoolers are very busy with other everyday life things, but a lot of people in this organization I've found are very dedicated, and they really do put in an effort to make time, even outside of what's required to be an active member.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's interesting just to think about age. Now I've got age in my mind about how to be 18 to vote in the United States, to be 21 to drink. And when we think about our Democrats abroad around the world, I mean, age in many places is just a number. Annika, do you think some of these ages are fair, or should you be voting or, drinking
earlier? Yeah. Voting or drinking or both. Drinking and voting.
Dichotomy there. I think there's definitely a very strong movement. And I think a lot of our members of HSDA are involved in this about kind of lowering that voting age. I think what I can say is that HSDA definitely proves that there are wide and vast cohorts of high schoolers and young people that are engaged, that are paying attention, and that are doing everything they can to make their voice heard. So I think if the ballot box was open to them as another way to do that, that would be another great step in my eyes.
Yeah, Henry, same for you.
I've always been a very big proponent of lowering the voting age. And I can't speak to what HSDA as an organization supports, but I agree with what Annika says when I think the activism among our members really proves that regardless of the kind of access you have to the ballot box, that democracy isn't a spectator sport. And there's so much more you can do. And I've always found a big source of pride from helping other people to vote. So whether that's going to a door and somebody doesn't know where their polling place is, and I'll tell them where to do that, or if it's me registering my peers to vote because they'll be able to vote in the next election. I think that's always been, it feels like I'm participating in democracy, even if I can't do that directly at the ballot box.
Mm-hmm. So what would you lower it to, 16?
I think that would be nice. At least for me over the past 2 years, I would have loved to have voted.
Right,
Yeah,
of course. I'm thinking about the level of responsibility required from someone to drive, and how that equates to the level of responsibility required to participate in the democratic process. Is it that basically the same, do you think?
In a lot of ways, yes. I think it does require that level of responsibility. I also know that many states have different driving ages, so I don't know if we could necessarily equate those two. But
True.
But I mean, yeah, I can't speak to enough how inspiring it is to work with high schoolers who are my age or younger now at this point. Now we're kind of the oldies in the group, that are like going out and speaking at town halls and organizing local, events in their schools and their communities for candidates that they're passionate about. And I think if you're willing to put in all of that effort behind the scenes, you should be able to, be able to kind of directly have your voice heard as well.
Well, then is there a point if you get too old where you should not be allowed to vote?
Over 35, David, we've already that's beyond the hill.
But you talk about being involved in the process and to actively make decisions. And there's a lot of people who are well older than 18 that pay no attention to any of this whatsoever and maybe shouldn't vote. Henry, what do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely agree that I think the United States, compared to other countries around the world, I know you guys are both in Canada, and I'm sure they have higher voter turnout rates there. We really do. No, but I think truly one of the big things I think we can do to get youth turnout and turnout in general in this country is to start educating about democracy from a young age, and instilling just how important that vote is. So for like my generation, there's issues decided today that are going to impact us 40, 50, 60 years from now, whether that be preventing climate change or stopping gun violence or, making healthcare decisions. And I think young people, when we turn out to the ballot box, we're really saying that we have a voice on those issues. And if people don't do that, or people feel as though their voice doesn't have an impact because they haven't been raised in that sense of thought where, your vote can change that. I think that's why we see so many low turnout rates in elections all across the country. And I think part of what high school Democrats we're trying to do is really, exemplify how important democracy is, especially to young people, so that when they get to that age where they're able to vote, they've had experience working in elections, they've had experience seeing the issues up close, and they know that when they go to the ballot box, the decision they make is going to impact their future.
I think you're right. And I think also, I believe there are studies showing that the younger you are when you cast your first vote, the more likely you are to become a lifelong voter.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt that at all. Because it definitely is about that culture of civic engagement that we're trying to build here. And in some regards, that's not even partisan, right? Like, that's just about giving people the education and tools they need to be active and involved citizens, which is, their civic duty. So I think that I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was the case.
Well, because I think what Rachel's point is that it's like some people never bother to vote until their 30s and their 40s, just because they don't even see
they haven't gotten around to it. Yeah.
No, or they just don't see the value in elections, because every politician is exactly the same, and this one might come in, that one might come in, but really, does an individual's quality of life change all that much? At least that's the way they feel.
So, do you guys in your schools, in your respective states, have you been taught any sort of civics?
Yeah, and I actually Henry threw in a line earlier that made me smile because he said democracy is not a spectator sport, which is
Right.
a quote from one of the organizations that we both have actually been involved in outside of HSDA, which is Youth in Government.
Ah,
So I think most states have obviously like civics education in some capacity, whether that's through the government class or a civics class entirely on its own. But we also have seen there's a lot of great programs out there extracurricular wise that offer students ways to get involved in politics and government, whether through like mock legislatures or like HSDA, like through active like organizing. And
right.
I think all of those opportunities are great because they just give you more of a I guess I think the biggest takeaway for me is it really reminds you that your voice does matter. And to David's point earlier, I think political apathy is one of the biggest problems our generation faces. And the only way to get around that is to show people starting now that, the things that you do have to say, these issues that you care about, they do matter and they can be addressed if you kind of go through this pathway, if you invest in solutions and if you do your part in voting and being involved politically.
But I think for the change, the scale of change that Henry was talking about, this kind of education needs to be provided to every young person, not just those who are attracted to it through extracurricular activities.
Yeah. I actually would like to say, kind of back to your point too. I did a lot of research over the past few years on the topic of what I like to call civic deserts, which is
Nice.
basically areas across the country where young people are starved of opportunities to learn about government or get involved in government-related extracurriculars or learn kind of the core factors of civics. And I think it's a number, it's over half of rural youth
Wow.
live in those deserts. And it's the same in underserved urban communities as well. And a lot of that stems too from a lack of funding. And I think in my community, there's certainly that lack of opportunity. I mean, we have a civics course everyone has to take that's required to graduate, but that's kind of where things stop. Most people just do it so they can get their diplomas.
Yeah.
And I think civic culture has to go beyond just what's learned in the classroom. I actually started a club at my school called Civics Club, where we gather every month and debate about different political issues, and it's people of all different political parties. And
Nice.
we've found that those numbers have grown as more and more people get interested in the topics. But I think really a lot of some of the civic education action has to be student led, because people look to their peers a lot of times for what to get involved in. And I think that's part of the power of HSDA is it's completely student run. So people are seeing their peers doing this stuff and they're thinking, hey, it's possible for me to make a difference, or it's possible for me to go get involved in my local political party or work with candidates running for office or do advocacy. So I think these kind of organizations really have a unique kind of power.
Right. Well, now you got me curious about your research. Like, is it something because like a lot of people feel they're in a red place, state, county, town, whatever it is, or blue, red state, county, town, or whatever it is, or something's been so gerrymandered. Is it a feeling that they don't know how to vote, or they just don't believe their vote makes a difference?
I mean, I think it's a mixture of both. I mean, part of what we did at my school is we did a voter registration drive, and a lot of people that came up to register to vote hadn't even realized there was an election coming up, or didn't know that they had to register to vote, or weren't planning to vote until we put information out there. And once we registered them to vote, and they learned about the candidates. So I think sometimes it's an information gap too, and especially in some of these rural communities like my own, where political divides are kind of widened, and like you said, there's a lot of gerrymandering, so people feel as though their vote's lessened. I actually was at a rally for Fair Maps here in Green Bay a couple days ago, and I spoke on how young people feel disempowered because they feel as though their voice is being discounted when the outcome of the election is already set based off of how the map's drawn. So I think it's really a combination of all those factors that you listed, David.
Yeah. And Annika, do you sort of pick on that for you too? Do you find sometimes people who know too much don't feel the need to vote, or is it the other way around?
I think I don't think information is ever a catalyst for inaction in any way. I feel like if
well, but that's where the gerrymandering effect or something comes into, where you honestly know in your heart that your vote won't really make a difference. This same person will still get elected.
That is very true. I guess I was misunderstanding what you were asking there, but I think the biggest issue tends to be lack of information just in general, like Henry said, about, elections. And I'm speaking particularly about high schoolers and young people in this sense, where it's like, oh, like today's election day. Like, I didn't even know, like, you know, or you get the calendar reminder at 7 a.m. to go vote. And you're like, oh, well, I hadn't even thought about it yet. So I think that tends to be the biggest kind of barrier. But the gerrymandering and just kind of the loopholes that are used to try to ensure that apathy is sustained, and that people, like, even once they do realize it is election day, like, they won't make a plan to vote or actually get out and vote. I think that plays kind of like a secondary role in just like kind of it allows people to justify in a way that they're not voting because, X, Y, and Z. And it's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed. And, like Henry said, it's something that I think a lot of youth-led movements are really working on. But I think the first step is always getting that information out there, making sure people know that, if you do want to address gerrymandering, well, you have to work within the system right now to go get it fixed. You can't you can't address it unless you're actually doing something about it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. That's the challenge.
Yeah. So tell us about the DNC meeting. I should probably explain for our listeners. We connected because at the Democratic National Committee meeting, you connected with friend of the pod and amazing DA member and DA delegate.
And future president of the world.
Future president of the world. Don't laugh too hard, Miguel. Miguel Madrigal. Because we know he listens religiously and we appreciate it. But Miguel put us together because you guys connected at the DNC meeting. So tell us about it. I assume it was your first time there. What was it like? What did you learn? What did you communicate? Tell us everything.
The DNC meeting was incredible. You were right. It was Henry and I's first time. And I think it was just awesome being there from a high schooler's perspective, because we haven't had HSDA representation at the DNC for very long. So it is still a very big shock to a lot of people when they see, a 16 and 17-year-old walking around there.
But your children, what are you doing here?
Exactly.
Oh my God.
The wonderful part about it is that it's a really great conversation starter, because everyone wants to ask these two high schoolers, if they're lost or if they know where they are right now and all of these things. But in general,
they're lost.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're at a hotel in St. Louis. They might think you walked in the wrong door or something like that.
Did you know you're at a political meeting?
Do you know your parents know you're here?
It's such an attention grabber. That's wonderful. But keep going. We're interrupting your flow. Keep.
No, it's a really funny, I guess, situation, but it's such a great conversation starter, and it allowed us to meet with a lot of really awesome and supportive, I will say, DNC members that are just excited to see more youth presence. We have a youth council at the DNC, and it is, maybe surprising, maybe not, but it is very small compared to the sizes of most other councils and caucuses there. So it is really great first of all, it was great to meet with the other youth council members and just kind of discuss how we are going to be the future of the party and ensure that more people are getting involved at a younger age, because we really do have to play a role in ensuring that our futures are secured from any number of issues. But we also got a great chance to pass a resolution at the DNC together. And maybe Henry wants to speak more on that, but that was a really meaningful moment as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, tell us, Henry.
Yeah, no, it was first off, I second everything that Annika said about just how wonderful and empowering of an experience that attending the DNC meeting in St. Louis was. We both wrote a resolution centered around the affordability of higher education, especially with some of the recent events going on with President Biden's efforts to cancel student loan debt. And we also wrote about book bans, which is a very pertinent issue to us as high school students. I mean, I know of school districts just around my community where books are being taken off of the shelf just because people on a school board or in an administration might disagree with ideas presented in a book. I mean, it's really terrible stuff.
And they're even coming off the shelves because librarians and teachers are afraid someone's going to say, hey, that shouldn't be there, which is even one step worse.
Yeah, no. And we really wanted to take a stand. And everyone at the DNC agreed that having access to quality education is important, whether that be having free access of information on ideas throughout elementary, middle, and high school education, or being able to afford a college education so that you can get a degree. So we passed that resolution. We both spoke on it in front of a lot of the membership gathered in the resolutions committee. We actually spoke to DNC Chair Harrison about it and DNC Secretary Ray from my home state of Wisconsin about it. They were both very supportive. So it was really very empowering as two students to see such support from some of the most prominent, politicians and party officials in the country as we fought for a freer and fairer education.
Amazing. Congratulations. I'd actually, if it's possible, I'd love to link the description of this episode to the text of your resolution, if that's an option.
Oh, yeah, of
definitely.
course.
Super.
And Annika, to sort of follow up on book bans and stuff, none of this is new. History has been here before.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's an issue that we have seen, I think, just proliferating in recent years. I think we're kind of fighting a culture war right now that is bleeding into our classrooms. And Henry and I just, in just personal communication and also just within our capacities as HSDA executive board members, both agreed that it is it's affecting quite a significant portion of our membership. And it's something that I have, experienced personally in my school district and my county libraries. We have seen, displays and certain books be taken off the shelves and off the walls because, like you said, it's that culture of fear. Like most librarians, even if it is allowed, they're afraid to even put it up there because they think that it may be taken down.
Yeah,
so
they'll get in trouble. Yeah.
But not even in recent years, decades ago, we went through this exact same thing, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so it is kind of sad that we have to kind of go back and repeat this whole fight for pushing against censorship in our classrooms. But, we are here again. And I think it's important that we do draw attention to the issue as opposed to kind of brushing it under the rug.
For sure. So do you think having to go back and refight old battles is baked into democracy?
In a lot of ways, yes. I think democracy definitely works in cycles and history too. It does tend to. I mean, I think we can point to any number of issues where we have had to either continue the push or try to go over issues that we've already discussed. But I think the way I like to look at it is that history is a spiral. And so even if you are moving in circles, you are still pushing forward in some capacity. And that's what we're aiming to do here.
Awesome.
Yeah, I feel like we're challenging you on what you learned in your civics classes now, Cub. Because like Henry, this can get a lot worse, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I often like to say, which is that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And sometimes I think in many ways it can feel as though we're stepping backwards. I mean, that's certainly how a lot of people in my generation felt when Roe v. Wade was overturned and rights that our grandmothers fought for are now being relitigated. But we also, in response to that, saw an outpouring of support from young people to enshrine abortion in state constitutions. In Ohio, we just passed that resolution. HSDA actually did calling sessions to help make sure that constitutional amendment passed. In Wisconsin, our high school Democrats chapters helped elect a pro-choice justice to the state Supreme Court. And so I think, there's going to be setbacks, but we use those as ways to fuel our movement. And those who try to push oppression of that source. I mean, you look back at the history books, those are the people who, are remembered in negative ways. And those are the people who ultimately don't succeed because they can't forever suppress a push towards freedom or a push towards equality.
A very heartening viewpoint.
Yeah, I'm motivated, Henry.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's definitely motivational. I mean, just talking to you guys you give us tons of hope, and I really appreciate that.
Well, we're honored to do so. I think we represent just we're two representatives of a much larger movement of young people that are ready to get their hands dirty and get involved. So
that's fantastic, and we need you. Yeah,
yes. And it's hard sometimes. We in Canada, for example, Justin Trudeau 10 years ago, got swept into power with the great support of young people who have kind of turned against him now because he got in there, he got elected, making a whole bunch of promises, and he's had years and years and years and just hasn't been able to keep all those promises that everybody went and voted for him to. So, Henry, I guess it's your turn. Like, have you started to see this with politicians where they get in there, even if they're on our side and they don't keep their promises?
I think a lot has to be said sometimes for how divided we are and how gridlock in DC stands in the way of some of these policy goals. I mean, I look to all of what President Biden said and promised in his campaign he's accomplished. And what he hasn't been able to accomplish has been due to obstructionism in Congress. Things like the filibuster in the Senate, which pretty much says that you need 60 senators, a supermajority, to pass any sort of legislation through the United States Senate. In my mind, that's fairly undemocratic. Because it stifles the people's voices. But I think for the most part, President Biden and Democratic leadership for the past 4 years have accomplished some historic things, whether it be fighting for student loan cancellation, whether it be the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, capping the price of insulin, allowing Medicare and Medicaid to negotiate drug prices. And one of my big goals is that I do sometimes see this disillusionment among young people because we can kind of fall into this trap of self-defeatism where we say it's impossible to make change and the system is constructed against making change. But I've always said that if you don't vote, it's going to be impossible to fight that obstructionism or push through some of these ideas you want. So I've tried to communicate just how much we've been able to accomplish, even with so many cards stacked up against us. And two, I've said that, we can keep pushing and keep fighting, but to do it, you need to turn out to vote. Because otherwise people who are pushing in the opposite direction are going to find their way into office. I mean, we saw that back in 2016 when people failed to turn out to vote, and our country went through a rough 4 years before we elected President Biden to office.
So how much have you had conversations with people pushing in the opposite direction?
Well, I can speak for myself and say definitely quite a lot. Like I said, I live in South Carolina. So right. for the most part, we have and I live in a pretty red area as well. So just kind of, you always get some of the bigoted and the hate comments, but I think I've also been able to have really productive conversations using some of the things that Henry mentioned, because I think there is something to be said about keeping politicians accountable, and I am the biggest proponent of that. But it also requires us being aware of what they have actually accomplished. And sometimes with bills like, the Inflation Reduction Act, you hear that name and you don't really recognize that was, the most significant investment in climate action that we have had. And I think like quite a few decades in the US. And so things like that are getting passed with maybe these misnamed or like kind of more brand tested names, but that are actually doing really, really great work. Like educating my friends and my peers and even adults on what has been passed, what has been accomplished, and what we can continue to fight for. I think that has led to a lot of productive conversations. I intern with our local Democratic Party here in Greenville, and sometimes people will just call in and just ask for general information like that. It's not always so vitriolic. And those conversations are really, I think, productive in my mind. And, they may call in as longtime Republican, and I don't think we changed their mind overnight, but we definitely give them some food for thought, and that's how that real progress starts.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you find those lists of President Biden has done this, this, this. You find that to be persuasive, maybe not fully persuasive, but at least people take it in and start to think.
Yeah, and I think definitely at the national level that is a really powerful way of spreading that information. But a lot of times at the local and the state level, people, I guess they forget that politics isn't, all about the president.
Right.
And when you just remind them, like I ran a mayoral race here in Greenville for a Democrat, and it was a very tough fought race. But the issues that people care about for their mayor are not about, these big national issues. Obviously those are important, but they also just want to hear about, affordable housing and green spaces and things like that. And reminding them that, I think that the adage that all politics is local is very true, but also reminding them that, like, you have to be invested in that in order to see the results in your local community.
right.
Wow. So hang on a second. You're the one who's 16, right?
Well,
I'm just asking.
Turned 17.
Oh, you turned 17. Okay, now you're 17,
Yes.
but before you turned 17, you ran a campaign for a mayoral candidate?
So I was not running it, but I was kind of working on it with our team at the Greenville County Democratic Party.
Got
I
it.
guess I should have rephrased that. No. We had a wonderful campaign manager, and I cannot take any of the credit for the things she did. But,
knowing that you weren't the campaign manager takes nothing away from what you've said already. But I really had to stop on that.
No. That's an important, I guess, distinction. But working with that team, we were running a couple of city council races and a mayoral race in this 2023 election. And
amazing.
Working with all of those groups has been awesome.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. People do forget about the down ballot races, and they're so important. It's part of the message we try to give voters overseas, that they really need to vote all the way down the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yep.
And Henry, I think you tried to jump in there at one point.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to kind of, I think what Annika talked about, just really meeting people where they're at, even when there's disagreements, I think there's a particular power to that. I'll say that I live in a community that is very deeply red, especially in my school. My political beliefs are very much in the minority. What I've found is that I've been able to build friendships and have discussions with people who might disagree with me. And I've been able to sway them on some of these issues. I moderated a discussion on minimum wage in my school, which was pretty split down the middle at first. People arguing that it shouldn't be raised. But as we brought up some of the topics and brought up personal stories and how these policies affected people and how these policies affected people in our community, people started to be swayed. And I really kind of related how a lot of these policies are impacting my own community. When, in the Inflation Reduction Act, when we're putting in billions of dollars towards green energy, a lot of that's going to our agricultural producers, which are kind of the backbone of our rural economy. And I say, hey, look at how this has been a positive impact. And some of these people in my school who might get swept up into the culture war back and forth are seeing some of these real life impacts. And even though I disagree with them a lot of times on many different issues, it's having a sort of sway.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the other old phrases is diplomacy is done in the hallways, which is, in the middle of the debate on the floor of the Senate or the House or whatever it is, you might stand up and say one thing, but as you walk down the hall, or you might be
bump into someone in the restroom.
Yeah, or in Ottawa, there was a legendary thing for years where a group of people from different parties just got together, had nachos, and it's amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing how much work can be done. And Annika, is that part of what you're seeing?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's exactly why HSDA has been so successful, because that's exactly what HSDA does. It's diplomacy in those classrooms and hallways in schools and in communities. So we have I think our structure really allows for that grassroots advocacy and that just one-to-one personal connections that members can have with peers and family members and friends. And that's how movements are built, I think, at their core. So I really think that being able to have a structure that allows for people to meet people where they're at, like Henry said, and just discuss these ideas in ways that are kind of respectful and open-minded, as opposed to the vitriol and the hatred that we often see on the TV and on news. I think that is how that's how we grow, and that's how we get the changes that we want to see implemented.
So you two had a chance to go and visit Biden at the White House.
Yes, that's right. It was a great experience. Henry and I had the opportunity to go to the White House for the announcement of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Definitely an issue that we both care about immensely, and that affects a lot of high school students across the country. So to be there for that announcement, to be able to speak with families of victims and to speak with survivors, and to be there for that historic kind of investment in addressing the issue of gun violence was just incredible. And it was also great to just see how, I think in that movement particularly, it is very youth led. Like the vast majority of the audience was young people with these various interest groups that are out there fighting for change. And it was great to meet them.
For sure.
Henry, how was the experience for you?
Honestly, I think it was incredible just to see the power of the movement pushing for fighting back against gun violence. I think one of the highlights of my day was meeting actually the first ever Gen Z member of Congress, Congressman Max Frost from Florida. And we had a great conversation with him about youth involvement and youth action. And I believe he's 25, 26. So he's the youngest member of Congress. And just to see somebody from my generation, Generation Z, representing youth voices in the halls of Congress, and then speaking at the White House about gun violence, an issue that has plagued our generation as we work through school. It was moving. And it was moving to see a president that's prioritizing youth issues, that's inviting young people like Annika and myself and people with organizations like March for Our Lives to come to the White House and see him make this historic announcement. It's certainly something I'll never forget.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So I'm actually looking at, you have a map on your website that shows all your, I don't know if they're chapters or maybe they're actually individual schools. How many different little tiny entities are represented on this map? I assume you know what I'm looking at.
Yes, I do. Actually, our data directors are going through right now and updating that map. So I don't know if I can give you the number for this year right now, because that's
cool.
their project for these couple of weeks.
I mean, it's an incredibly impressive little sprinkling all over the country.
Yeah, we have chapters in schools and then also community-based chapters. And I think as we were discussing with some of your Democrats Abroad folks, sometimes the school chapters are really effective because you already have that, grouping of students right there. But yes. I think especially abroad, like those community chapters are oftentimes great because you can collect students from lots of different schools and you can do more work with like the broader community. So it's a mixture of both on that map.
Right. And there are a few areas where there is nothing. So I'm wondering, how do you make inroads? Well, I'm just looking at it because you have such impressive representation through. No, I'm looking at the U.S.
I know.
So like Montana, Idaho, I see nothing. How do we make inroads in those? Looks like New Mexico is also. Well, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's a great question. And actually, it's a really nice way for us to plug an effort that we started. I think once we walked away from the DNC meeting, Henry and I, and eventually our entire board, just got really revved up and excited. We met so many awesome state party chairs in states where they were kind of inactive or very small HSDA chapters, and places like Dems Abroad and all of that. So we launched this plan called the 50 Plus Plan, where we are working with our state leaders and our national staff in order to make some significant investments in expanding to all of the places that we aren't in, and hopefully getting to all 50 states. And then the plus stands for, our territories and our Dems Abroad groups as well. So by the end of our term, we'd like to be able to say that 50 plus has been accomplished. And we've started off by working with state leaders to figure out where exactly they're at with numbers and like their comms teams and their programs teams and all of that good stuff. And I think we were kind of launching programs based off that. So Henry actually spearheaded a new one that we just started called our Rural Outreach Commission, if he wants to talk a bit about that.
Sure.
Yeah. I think so. I worked as Midwest Regional Director last year, and an interesting thing I kind of realized is there's a lot of rural states in the Midwest, and we had a lot of struggles working with some of the Midwestern state chapter chairs because it was just so hard to reach a lot of students in these rural communities. I had that struggle when I was organizing students in my own community, and I've had struggles reaching out to people across the state in more rural areas. So I said that we as HSDA should really be investing in an initiative to reach out to youth of all ages, all locations. And part of that means reaching out to rural youth. So we started the Rural Outreach Commission to kind of figure out some organizing strategies, see what works, see what doesn't, see what the biggest issues to rural youth across the country are, how we can meet them on these issues, how we can look bigger picture in some of these more rural states like the Dakotas and Montana, and I could list so many, but we really are trying to put our best foot forward when it comes to trying to organize into these harder to reach areas, because I've learned firsthand. I mean, I think I'm an example of there are progressive young people in these rural communities. Sometimes they're just harder to reach,
Right.
and you have to work a little harder to get in touch with them or get them active or organized.
That's fantastic.
And to add on to that, I think we have very powerful tools in social media that allow us to kind of reach out to people all across the nation and the world. And so I think working on our comm strategies and finding ways of connecting with exactly what Henry said, those progressive organizers in red states or states where we don't have HSDA chapters yet. I think that's a big focus for us. And another key thing that we have been pushing for is an investment from just Democrats and state parties and local parties for youth coordinators. I think in Wisconsin, they had one, and Henry can speak firsthand to the benefits of that. But we are really excited to see more and more states kind of take this up as, a paid youth organizer, youth coordinator, whatever you may call it, that is in charge of kind of securing that youth vote, because it's going to be so critical in 2024.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, and also connecting with those state chairs is huge.
Oh, definitely. I think some of our most active and vibrant chapters, they are that successful because they have the backing and the support of their state party, whether that's financial or, programmatic or, just giving them access to Vote Builder and resources like that. I think HSDA is very unique, and every single state chapter kind of has a different relationship with this party. But whenever we're able to make those inroads and whenever we're able to connect with a party or with a Young Democrats or a College Democrats chapter in that area, it's always just more beneficial, because I think the main message here is that we should not be working against each other. We should be working with one another to promote our shared vision.
For sure.
That's it. Exactly.
One other thing I notice on this map, there is only one dot that's outside the U.S., and it happens to be the middle of nowhere in Alberta in Canada. West of Edmonton. What's that doing there?
That's not the middle of nowhere. I've been there. That's a beautiful part of the world.
What? I just meant it's all by itself outside the borders of the U.S. So you already have, it looks like, one of your chapters is already outside the U.S. with Democrats Abroad. So, I mean, I don't know if these people know about Democrats Abroad, but you seem to already have a connection here.
Yeah. I know. I guess we've actually, like Annika said, we're still kind of updating some of those maps too. So we've got more chapters registered all around the world, and we've had people reach out wanting to start chapters.
Oh, wow. Wonderful.
And the connections we built with Miguel and Dems Abroad have been really valuable. I've actually worked with some of our regional directors on our national staff team, and they're in direct communication with some people at Democrats Abroad all across the world right now, trying to set up HSDA chapters. We passed a resolution through our national committee clarifying how we would structure the HSDA chapter of Democrats Abroad. So we're making really good progress.
Fantastic.
Yes, I'll say I think we had a chance to speak with Corey and some of the Asia Pacific team for Dems Abroad, and I'm really
Right.
excited to see some progress there. And every so often we even just get emails to our general email. It's like a student in India or Thailand or just some far out place, at least at least to me. And
Right.
it's so awesome to see that they are taking the initiative to look up HSDA and try to figure out ways to get involved. And so we're always looking for ways that we can support Democrats abroad, especially high school Dems abroad.
Yeah.
And we're really excited about this future partnership.
Awesome.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. So there's a reason we gather for things like the DNC meeting.
Exactly. No, very, very beneficial.
That's awesome.
Minus, I mean, it does require probably 3 cups of coffee a day to make it through, but it's worth it.
Annika's probably cringing right now, remembering me spilling my coffee all over the table in front of
Chair Harrison.
You started drinking coffee in high school?
I did for the DNC.
Oh my God.
Because it was.
I think Rachel asked how we get through it all. I think caffeine's probably the number one.
Oh, no.
Number one way.
Oh no. How much sleep did you get, or how little sleep did you get that weekend?
I think probably very little, but lots of great memories and connections. So it balanced out.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah. I guess the only other question I have, unless you have others, David, is there anything you haven't said that you would like to say?
Well, I don't know. I know Henry's unmuted right now, but I think the biggest thing we'd like to say, first of all, is thank you, Rachel and David, for having us on here and for being interested in hearing what HSDA has going on, because I think, like you said, one of the best ways that we can promote this movement is just getting out there and reaching new audiences. So we're very, very excited to see how we're going to work with high school Dems abroad. If anybody is listening to this and has questions about how they can get involved, you can feel free to go onto our website at hsdems.org. And we have lots of resources about setting up local chapters, and all of our contact information there is there too. And Henry and I, as well as the rest of our board, would be more than happy to help you out with, any questions you may have. If you're, an adult or you're a parent and students that are interested, feel free to pass this information along. Like we said, we really like for this movement to be youth led. But if you're willing to give the support, even if you're not in high school anymore, we would be more than happy to have that. So we have, fundraising links on our website, and we have lots of opportunities for people to get involved.
Wonderful. Thank you. Henry, what about you? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, again, I second what Annika said, and wanting to thank you, David and Rachel, for having both of us on. This was wonderful. We really appreciate the chance to speak about some of the work we're doing, because, the clock is ticking for the election, and young people across this country are wanting to get involved. They just need a way to do that. And high school Democrats, for so many people, is a way to do that. So I think the more we spread organizational awareness, the more people we have reaching out. Like Annika said, if you're a young person in high school or an adult who wants to help out or get involved, you can, again, go to our website, hsdems.org. Shoot me an email. I can get you in touch with our regional directors who do a lot of our organizing in our states. We really are trying to put our best foot forward as things move on, so that by the time November 2024 comes around, and Annika and I will both be off in college, but we're hoping that youth turnout will be breaking records.
Right. Amazing.
Hey, Henry, before we let you go, what is a dad joke connoisseur?
They did their research.
My Instagram bio. That's my family is quite infamous for our dad jokes. I actually wrote one of my college application essays about my dad jokes and how unfunny they are, or funny, depending on your taste of humor.
Well, you have to share one now.
Yeah. I actually use this one. Funny story. I was a U.S. Senate page, so I interacted with Senator Cory Booker a lot, and Senator Booker loved telling us dad jokes, and I tried a few of my own on him. Senator Booker told me I was the least funny Senate page he'd ever met.
That's so mean. And he's not a mean man.
It was all in jest. It was all in jest.
I know.
I'm trying to think of a good one.
You have one, Annika, that you've heard from Henry?
No, Annika's got a dad joke.
I can try to remember. I was just going to say, every time Henry and I are able to get together, I think HSDA gives us a lot of awesome opportunities to meet up, whether it's at the DNC or, like the White House or Congress or all of these awesome things. But I just remember painfully groaning / laughing through all of it because of Henry's great jokes.
You have to have fun with all these politics, or it's
absolutely,
or you'll just drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Do we want to wrap up the podcast with one of my infamously bad dad jokes? Or?
Definitely. Although I have one other thing I wanted to say. Do you want to do the dad joke first or after?
I can do the dad joke first if you like.
All right.
All right. Why did the golfer bring an extra pair of socks?
Oh no, why?
In case he got a hole in one.
Oh, excellent. That is a connoisseur dad joke for sure.
That's a very good one.
Thank you.
So I want to say, this is a challenge to the listeners. You are probably the youngest people we've talked to date, and some of the most amazing. One of our most frequently listened to episodes, coming back to David's question about whether you can be too old to vote, was an interview we did with 4 women in their 90s who live in Ontario, who were preparing to vote against Trump. And for some reason, that episode, we did it we obviously did it a couple years ago. We did it before the 2020 election. It's always in our top 3. So I want to challenge our listeners to create your episode to cause it to be a rival. I want to see your episode in the top 3, vying with our nonagenarians. I think that would be lovely.
All of you young people listening, take that challenge to heart.
Exactly. And thank you both so much to both of you, both for joining us today and for all the incredible work you're doing. It's really amazing to hear from you, and I wish you the best in pursuing it, and keep us posted.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to speak with you all, and just a pleasure to get to know Democrats abroad. We're really excited to see everything the future holds.
That's great. I'm Rachel Oikster with David Schellenberg in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for listening to Democrats Abroad, the Blue Vote Cafe.